Hey guys, and welcome to my full spoiler review of Captain America: Brave New World. Today I'm going to be talking about what I liked and what I disliked about this film, but I'm going to start off with a summary just to get you prepared for exactly what the film was about before I break it down. So this is the fourth Captain America film with Steve Rogers now retired. We don't know where he is now, but Sam Wilson, who was his wingman as the Falcon, has now stepped into the role that was handed to him by Steve Rogers. He's taken on the shield. He is now Captain America, but he still has his capabilities as the Falcon. So now this is a new world where basically you have Thunderbolt Ross, who's now played by Harrison Ford, is now the president. And basically there is a whole treaty that is the kind of central plot of this film that he's trying to negotiate with these other countries to do with the adamantium of that big celestial hand that is sticking out of the ocean that occurred during the Eternals movie. And so they're trying to negotiate a treaty for the countries to have access to that adamantium. But surrounding that is that there is a conspiracy that by someone, an unknown person, who has basically caused these people, including the former unknown Captain America, the Black Man Isaiah, who they basically become mind controlled into attempting to assassinate the president. And these occurrences keep happening where people keep getting mind controlled. And basically Sam, along with his new wingman, who's the Falcon, now is there on a quest to basically uncover the conspiracy and stop, obviously, a world war from breaking out that is being forced by these mind-controlled people who are basically sabotaging this treaty from ever happening. If you know anything about this film and its development, is that it has gone through absolute hell to get to the screen. This film not only had reshoots, but was essentially reshot from all that we know. They basically reshot the entire film for whatever reason. Obviously, it wasn't up to scratch. And they took that and they reshot it, and then they've done reshoots after reshoots of supposed scenes here and there, even adding characters to the film along the way, such as Giancarlo Esposito's character. He was not in the original draft, and then he all of a sudden got brought in for other reshoots. So this film was an absolute mess from start to finish in its development, and just to see it finally on the screen as sort of a Frankenstein monster kind of thing is kind of a sight to behold in itself. But that said, if you saw my out of the theater review, you would know my thoughts on this are kind of middle ground. Like I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. I thought it was fine in parts, and I thought it had some issues too, but just being as objective with it as much as I can, I kind of do appreciate that they were able to somehow pull something together out of all the hell that it went through to come through its development. So I'm going to start now talking about the things that I liked before getting into the things that I disliked. So let's get started. So starting off, I think the strongest character in the film, surprisingly, is actually Thaddeus Ross, so Thunderbolt Ross, played by Harrison Ford. Not just because Harrison Ford is playing the character, but I felt like, strangely enough, even though this is titled a Captain America movie, I feel like his character gets most of the thing resembling an arc throughout the film. Cap's character doesn't really have an arc. He's kind of just the same guy from start to finish, whereas Ross here, on the other hand, he's come into the presidency. He's had his issues in the past, which has led to his estrangement from his daughter, Betty Ross. But he's now the president, and he is seeing things in a new light. And he's trying to bring Sam Wilson into the fold, who he's previously had disagreements with, obviously with the whole Sokovia Accords and all of that. But he's now trying to bridge the gap, come together, and they both kind of have the same attitude that whilst they see things very differently, for the sake of America and the sake of the world, they're trying to put on a strong face for the public. And so with that, he's trying to sign these treaties around the world for the access to the adamantium and all that. But during this process, what is uncovered is that he was doing some dodgy things behind the scenes with Samuel Stearns, who was one of the guys from The Incredible Hulk, one of the first MCU movies, and he was doing some shady stuff. And it turns out that he was doing these because Ross himself was having heart issues. So he was testing with this guy, and so to kind of get tests done for his heart, so to save him, and it's kept him alive to this point. But one of the side effects of it, spoiler obviously, is that he has become the Red Hulk, and it's turned him into that, which finally gets unveiled at the end of the film. And that kind of comes full circle in that when he surrenders, to Ross, and surrenders himself as well to being put in prison forever, essentially, he's kind of fulfilling his arc that he's finally making sacrifices, the kind of things that his daughter wanted him to do, rather than always being driven further and further. He's finally letting go, and at the very end he gets his reward by finally being reunited with his daughter, which he'd been wanting to do throughout the whole film. He'd been striving to do good, he just didn't know how, and couldn't quite control his anger in certain ways, and obviously culminated in turning into the Red Hulk. But full arc was basically he learned from his mistakes, and at the end he made the moral decision and was rewarded by seeing his daughter. So To me, that was a nice arc, pretty simple, nothing crazy by any means, but we do get to see a lot of three dimension to his character, particularly when he's like they're pulling at him at the strings in terms of to kind of pushing at his anger, and the leader guy Samuel Stearns is on the phone with him and he's prodding him because he knows every time he gets prodded he looks weak, which doesn't help for his chances with negotiating the treaty with the other countries who are obviously already looking down on him, and his ability to even control his own country and what's going on with him, and his own life is under threat. So just seeing all these people poking at him from different angles and how it culminates in his anger, that was a nice little touch I thought throughout, and it was well done. So I can appreciate all that, and I thought Ross was definitely the best character in the film. Another thing I liked is that the film kind of stays apolitical for the most part, despite being an explicitly political thriller, I guess, which I thought was nice to see, for one, but to me it was also kind of glaringly like visible that this was clearly something that occurred in reshoots. There were certain scenes that were set up that just looked like they were going to go a certain way, but then something that Sam or Ross says in that moment kind of goes back, rather than to being like partisan and political, they kind of make a generalized statement to say, you know, we can do better, we can see the good in each other despite our differences. So I don't know, I don't want to read too much into it, I'm not going to get political in this video, but it does feel that the timing of this film's development, along with what was going on in the real world and what has culminated in recent elections in the US, has kind of shaped what this film turned into, wanting to be a bit more partisan to one side, but seeing another side triumphant in the real world. And it's kind of turned that a bit to be shaped towards being more kind of about coming together rather than putting one side down over the other. You know, there could be obvious allegories done, I'm not going to talk about them, but with this Red Hulk to a certain political figure that some people would make, but they didn't go there with it, and I can appreciate that. They just did a kind of straight up political thriller, very basic one at that, but it steered clear from any kind of real world allegories, and yeah, look, I can appreciate that. And as I mentioned with the plot, it's really straightforward, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing, but to me it looks like they had this massive like bloated story that they obviously wanted to tell originally, which got really condensed down to this film to being really focused on what it was doing. It still has a bunch of contrivances, which I'll get to later on, but it sticks to what it's doing. None of the scenes feel like wasted time, and the runtime of the film, under 2 hours, really nice and tight in that regard, especially when we heard that the original runtimes of this film were going to be somewhere in the 2 hour 45 minute mark. So almost an extra hour of this film was chopped down. Don't know what it was, what storylines they cut out, but whatever it is, they kept it nice and tight because it is a very, very simple film. If they tried to over bloat it, it was just dragged and made it less entertaining. So they really just trimmed it down nicely so that whether you enjoyed it or not, at least you weren't bored for too long. And as I mentioned earlier, this film went through absolute hell to be developed. And something I can appreciate with this film, regardless of what the final product, was that they somehow managed to salvage something together to make something that resembles a somewhat coherent film. And like I said, it was nice and streamlined and just focused on its main plot and didn't have any other bloat injected into it for unnecessary reasons. So to me, I can commend the effort that it went through hell to get to the big screen, and now that it's here, you know, it somewhat makes sense, and that's fine. I can give credit for that. As for the action, there's kind of a couple things that did stand out to me, which was the aerial battle. There is one where this takes place over the ocean with Navy battleships and all of that, where Falcon and Captain America and now his Falcon, his wingman, are trying to stop these military aircrafts from causing disaster. And that's a cool sequence. I feel like anything with Falcon, you want to see aerial battles. That's kind of the best use of him in action sequences. The other one, I think, the end fight between Captain America and the Red Hulk was decent. I enjoyed parts of it. Not a huge battle, but it was decent enough. There's some issues with it, but it is decent enough. And so I appreciated those two action sequences as being some of the best in the film. And finally, no multiverse. It's such a relief to just have a Marvel film that is not bogged down by having to reference things from other universes, this and that, alternate characters, whatever you want to call them, alternate realities. It was just very focused in this one reality, did not mention it in any way whatsoever what's going on in other ones. Just very focused on what's going on in this one. Whether you like the content of it or not is up for discussion, but like at least it wasn't bogging itself down by all the multiverse nonsense that we've seen throughout phase 4 and 5. It's just very much focused in the real world, and I can appreciate that. But what I would say is that in the post-credit scene, there is a mention of it. It doesn't mention multiverse, but Samuel Stearns, who Sam is talking to, he mentions that there is, threats from other worlds, other realities. Like the mathematics adds up that there is something coming that's going to be greater that we're not going to be able to deal with. And so that's why Sam is kind of leaning towards, rebuilding the Avengers essentially. But yeah, so it does kind of hint at it in the post-credit scene, but at least it has no bearing on the events of this film, which was refreshing to see. Now for what I disliked. So as I mentioned about what I liked, that Thaddeus Ross was the most fleshed out character of the film. What I didn't like is that obviously this is a Captain America film, and we didn't get to know Sam really any more than what we already knew about him before this film. So we know him as, Steve's trusted wingman, who's always there for him, a good man, decent one, ex-military, all of that. We saw a bit more about his family and what he's going through on a personal level in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. All of that, none of that is continued in this film. We don't get to see a sense of what being Captain America really means to him, any more than just the whole debate about whether he should take the serum or not. That seems to be his most complex inner battle going on, is that should he take the serum or should he not? And it's a really weak one because on the one hand, okay, Bucky at one point makes the point to him that, Steve was the ideal to aspire to be. You're the actual one that people can aspire to be because you're not enhanced, you're just a regular guy. But at the same time, he's so loaded up with, Wakandan technology, vibranium, all these things, gadgets that he has at his disposal, that he's more powerful than Steve Rogers essentially with what he has in his arsenal now. So it doesn't really make sense like that the serum is this big thing for him. He should take it because that's what would officially make him a super soldier, but it's not at the core of what it means. Like you can aspire to be Steve Rogers without having being enhanced because it's what he believes in and how he never gives up. I can do this all day. That's something that any person in this world can relate to, and that's just his mantra, and it's something we can very much get behind. Sam is just he's just doing what he needs to do to service the plot in this film, and it doesn't really go any further than that. He at the end, he hasn't taken the serum. By the end of the film, he's defeated the Red Hulk without having taken the serum, but you don't get to know anything more about his character, more about his family, his upbringing, what makes him tick, that makes him different to Steve Rogers. It's just, he's basically doing the same and saying the same things that Steve would do on most occasions. So it's like, why is he here? What are we gaining from him being Captain America? So that's a shame because I quite like Sam as a character, as the Falcon, and there's potential with what they could do with him as Captain America, but they just didn't execute it here. As for the contrivances of this film, there were two scenes that really stood out to me. There's probably a lot more, but two that stood out. The first one is that the conversation that takes place straight after the assassination attempt, where Ross is in his bunker and Cap walks in, and they're having a conversation. They're basically, Ross now feels not betrayed by Sam, but feels like he can't protect him or do anything, so he doesn't want to continue their relationship that he was talking about with him earlier, about them teaming up to take on the world or whatever, and he doesn't want Cap to help him with that anymore. The way the conversation starts, where he wants Sam in the room and only Sam, but then by the end of it, he's just telling him, you're not Steve Rogers, I'm not going to work with you, blah blah blah, you're useless, all of that. So it felt like two conversations, and I don't know if something happened in reshoots where they needed the conversation just to get to the point where he is now, where Ross exiled Sam essentially. So it felt very forced and contrived how the way they got to that point in the conversation. I didn't like that one at all. And then the other contrived conversation, which was by far the most, was with Giancarlo Esposito's character, which is codenamed Sidewinder, when he's being held prisoner, after Sam had caught him, and Sam goes to meet with him to talk to him to find out what the bad guys are doing. They are mortal enemies. Yet he starts to talk with him, and Sidewinder tells him everything that the bad guys are doing. And then as they're walking off, Sam says, you better not try to leave here. And the guy says, when I do, I'm going to kill you. So they still hate each other, yet Sidewinder just told him everything that Sam needs to know in order to make his next moves. Why did he open up to Sam? It doesn't make sense. It was such a stupid thing considering his animosity for Sam. Why is he just being so happy to just tell him everything and then be like, oh, but I'm still going to get you? doesn't make sense. It was really contrived and clearly only happened so that they could progress the plot. And as we know, Giancarlo Esposito's character was not in the original draft of the film. He was put in during the reshoot, so something's going on there and they couldn't figure it out, so they just had this contrived scene just to progress the story. The CGI was another aspect that I didn't like in this film. You know, MCU films have kind of become known of late for being quite poor when it comes to the CGI. There's just too much going on and they don't feel finished a lot of the times. And that definitely feels like the case here. But I'm a little bit more forgiving with this film considering the development hell it went through. But still, they spent $350 odd million on this film. There should be no excuse for poor CGI, but there are times where it looks pretty shoddy. Some of the flying sequences and whatnot. I thought Red Hulk looked quite good as to see from a CGI standpoint, but other things like some of the things they were doing with the aerial battles just didn't feel right. So yeah, it's a shame the CGI wasn't up to par. And regarding the action, I mentioned the things that I liked earlier with the aerial combat and the battle with Red Hulk, but I found the hand-to-hand combat was really lacking in this film. It was very poor quality. And starts off with this film, there is a hand-to-hand action sequence, a lot of it in fact, and it just feels sluggish, it feels lame, it feels bland, it's nothing we haven't seen before. But even then, just the way that the edits are going on with the camera and what they're showing us, what they're not showing us, feels very jumpy, but at the same time doesn't feel free-flowing, and it doesn't feel authentic, like a real fight is happening with weight. It feels very choreographed and just feels kind of slow and sluggish at times, so I found that quite poor. Ultimately, though, what I disliked about this film is that it feels like a poor man's The Winter Soldier, the second Captain America film. It wants to be a political spy, like espionage thriller, all of that. It has some of those tenets, but it just does not execute them as smoothly, anywhere near as much as that film or Civil War, anything like that. It's much more leaning towards the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series, which I thought was quite bad. And so it just does not have the quality of the writing and all of that going on to live up to a proper political thriller. It's got the basic bare bones of it, enough to be passable at times, but not enough to make you feel truly intrigued about what's happening next. It was really predictable, and a good political thriller should keep you guessing throughout. This one wasn't really there at all. It was just really bare bones and bland and just very mid. So my overall thoughts on this film in the end is kind of in the title of this film, which I've called an inoffensive mess. It's obviously went through hell to be developed. It is a mess. They were trying their best to pull together whatever they filmed to make something that resembled something to be coherent as a story. And it's inoffensive for the most part in terms of what it's trying to do as a film, because it really doesn't take any risks. So I can appreciate that they were able to muddle something together from the mess that they had, and it's completely inoffensive, but it's also ineffective as well in terms of being, making you feel anything, make you particularly excited or enjoying it or being memorable in any way. It's going to be a very forgettable film, but I'll give credit to its due just because of what it went through to be developed. And so for that, I am giving Captain America Brave New World a 6 out of 10. Would I recommend this film? It's entertaining enough at times. If you're someone who just does not care at all about the continuity of the MCU at this point, couldn't care less about the characters or actors in this film, or like having a very, intriguing plot, and you just want some mindless action, it is fine for that. You can definitely enjoy the film from that standpoint. You're not going to be blown away. There's nothing in this film from an action standpoint or plot standpoint or anything like that, creativity that you haven't seen before. It is very generic, but does the job to just be passable compared to what it went through. And that's kind of the theme of this whole video, is that it went through development hell, but it's here, and they were somehow able to pull something together. So that's my overall thoughts. Would I recommend it? Maybe. It might be for you, but I'm not going to give a strong recommendation. It's a very mid film, and yeah, it's come and gone. It's going to be forgotten next week, but we'll see what it means for the MCU going forward. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Captain America Brave New World, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think of the film? Did you like it, hate it, think it was mid as well? Whatever it is, I want to hear it all. Please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.